All right, hey, let's talk about vector displacement. Here is a blend file that I made just to kind of throw out there. It's free, you can download it in the link below. But what's happening is we've just got a plane that's subdivided and we're setting the position of each. Let me bring up the spreadsheet. I'll do this in the next little section too. But each of these positions we want to offset using a noise texture in the X, Y, and Z directions, which is how we're getting this kind of cool look. And then we're using scene time in a few different ways to drive the displacement. So let's go ahead and look at how we would set this up. So I'll start with a new scene. I won't explain everything, but I'll do kind of my best in a flyover. We're just making a geometry node setup, and we're going to use a grid, and we'll subdivide it. Before I throw it in line, let me just show you what this is looking like. I'll bring up my spreadsheet. I'm not using Python for this tutorial. And right now we've got 9 positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can count each vertice starts in the bottom left. If I throw this subdivision in line, you can see all of a sudden we've got 25 vertices and up and up and up and up and up. And the reason that we're doing this is we want to give the geometry more individual spaces to displace. So if let's throw in a set position. And right now, nothing's going to happen because it's just taking the position that's already being made by the geometry and outputting it, which is great. But we want a noise texture and we want to add it to the position. So let's bring in a position node. And if I connect this, same thing, nothing's going to happen. It's totally fine. That's what we want. But we want to connect these vectors. And what's happening is this is a field of vectors. You've got 1, 2, 3 values for one position, and then for another position, and then for another position. And we want to add to those. So let's go ahead and add in our color. Uh-oh, where'd it go? Oh, why did it go up here? And I know, it's weird. But if you think about it, a noise texture is generating values between 0 and 1. And it's not minus 0.5 to 0.5, which is what we want. So if you think about it, a value that would have been at 0, 0, if you're adding to it, it can only go in the positive X direction, only in the positive Y direction, and in the positive Z direction. So let's change that. Let's bring in another vector math. And if we think about it, what's between 0 and 1? 0.5. So we're going to subtract 0.5, which will put us right back in the middle so that we can have values that are, to negative 0.5, 2.5, which is exactly what we want. If you want to control the amplitude of how high or how wide it would go, you would just throw another vector math in line and you would multiply it, which is simple. But if we just leave it at 1, nothing happens. You can see if I bypass it with M, nothing happens. But I can control how much it goes in a single direction. So you can throw that in line if you want to. In the meantime, let's go ahead and bring our scale of our noise down to something a little bit more manageable. I'll do 4D just so it gives me a really quick way to animate. You don't have to do that. You could do that with a vector. We're just not going to do that here. Let's bring in scene time, which is just saying which frame we're on or how many seconds, which is taking into account your frame rate of your project that you're working in. But I'm going to use frame. If I connect that to the W, way too fast. So let's slow that down with just using math. And let's divide it. So if we're on frame 10 and I divide by 2, the output would be 5. Simple enough, but let's do it by quite a bit. And that I like that result. Maybe just a tad bit slower, maybe 350 instead. Yeah, I think that's looking nice. And let's set it to shade smooth just to get rid of a little bit of that harsher look. So set shade smooth and just put that as the very last thing. You can see the before and after. Cool. That is the majority of the work. Here's another little thing that I like to do is I like to shift it along one axis. So you can see that the noise is kind of generating, but I like to see the noise moving in a direction. It looks kind of more like wind to me when I do that. So let's just take this same position node and throw that into the vector. Nothing changes. Totally fine. We're going to add to it. And right now if we add 0, it should be exactly the same. It is. Good deal. And what do we want to add to it? Well, we only want to affect it on one axis. So if I throw this into the vector, it's slowly moving on all 3 axes, which just kind of already looks the same as before. So that's not what I want. So I'm going to use a combine XYZ node so that I can animate just one of these using scene time. And so I'm going to Control-Shift-D to keep it linked to whatever it's connected to before. And let's throw this into the Y. And if I really slow this down quite a bit, you can be like, oh yeah, it's definitely moving in the Y direction. So then I'll just locally rotate it using RR, and let's just find a speed that we like. I can go back to the camera, get the camera a little bit closer, maybe zoom it in. Maybe that's more the look that we're going for. But I don't think that's looking too bad. Maybe a little bit slower, a little 150. Yeah, we'll leave it something like that. We can make it a little bit wider by increasing the X size, and then we can just increase a couple of the X vertices to make the geometry a little bit more even. And what I mean by that is if I don't do that, you can see that it's stretched a little bit along one axis, which we don't want. So we'll add in and you can see that you can go too much in the other direction. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. I didn't do the math to where I'm like, I'm sure that this is even. But it's a little bit better than it was. Cool. But that's basically the entire tutorial. All I did was set the export range to 5,000. I adjusted the lighting a little bit. But it's like, it doesn't look bad the way that it is. It kind of looks cool that way. And just kind of floating in the wind doing its thing. But that's vector displacement. We're using let's go through our nodes really quick if we get them a little bit closer together. We're generating a grid. We're subdividing that grid. And then we're using the set position node, which is doing everything. Otherwise, it's just a subdivided plane. And with that set position, we're saying, hey, the original position, we want to add to it. And we're using a noise texture, which outputs values from 0 to 1. And so we're subtracting 0.5 so that whatever we add with the noise texture can go in the negative direction and the positive direction. And then we can amplify any axis that we want to with some vector math. We are also moving the noise texture by using the scene time, dividing the scene time by 150, and then moving it along the Y direction and adding it to its original position. So it might take you a few times of combining some of these ideas to see how it's actually going to work. But hopefully this is just a kind of a nice place to start. There are a lot of other textures that you can play around with that you don't have to use a noise texture for. The one that I use quite a bit is the wave texture for generating sine waves for doing some teaching stuff. But hopefully this has been helpful and kind of gets you started in the world of vector displacement and geometry nodes. Best of luck.